Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Denise White. I'm the Engagement Communications Manager here with CML, and I'm excited to bring in part 2 of our election series for 23 to 24, our years. And that is our host and our presenter. We've got Karen Goldman, who runs also our Municipal Clerk Program, Advisory Program. So many of you are familiar with her, but many of you, it seems like, because we've got a large audience of about 126 participants today, some of you may be newer to this. So looking forward to getting to the meat of the information. Little bit of housekeeping beforehand. Just thank you again for your time. We know lives and work schedules can be busy, particularly around this time of year. So thank you for making time to join us. For any elected officials today, you'll get 1 credit of university training credits for attending. Just want to make sure everyone is familiar with our format here. So if you look to usually the upper right part of your screen, you'll see like a control panel with a little caret. If you've got questions, and we're going to take questions in real time in this seminar today, please just add them into the question box or add them into the chat box. I'll be watching it on this side and letting Karen know when your questions come up. So feel free to put them in there, and we'll make sure those get answered as much as we can today. And then again, yeah, throughout our session, we're going to do this in real time. So just ask your questions as they come up when we're covering material through the seminar. Today's presentation is being recorded. So if you have to step away from your office for a moment, hopefully you don't, but if you do, you will be able to get this information later. We'll get it posted online, and I'll send a follow-up email once that's up on our cml.org site, along with the other training materials. Finally, before we really get on this presentation, want to acknowledge that you can get credit, and Karen, check me out, I'm going to missay how they can get credit and credit with who, but we have an online form we'll have on cml.org, so you'll be able to fill that out to get your clerk credit. That's not what it's called. What is it, Karen?
It's your certification credits for your CMC or MMC.
Thank you. Too many acronyms for my little brain to handle. So without further ado, Karen, I'm going to invite you to take us on the journey of nominations, petitions, and checking signatures as part of the election series.
Thank you, Denise, and welcome to everybody. I hope that you are all pretty much ready for the holidays. I have to say that I've managed to light the candles for Hanukkah every night. This year. Tonight's the last night, and so that feels good to have that behind me, although I'm still working very diligently on finishing up some of my holiday gifts that I'm going to be giving to people. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about the nomination petitions, the petition packets, and checking signatures on those petitions. I'm also more than happy to entertain any kind of questions you might have from the last webinar, which talked about building your calendars. Hopefully by now you've got your calendars pretty much completed. I'm still willing to take a look at some of them if you'd like. And with that, let's go ahead and move forward. So Denise, how about the first slide? Okay, so nomination petitions. The nomination petition is the primary way a citizen can get on the regular election ballot. And remember, your regular election is the one at which you will be electing your officials to office. And it is the only way a citizen can get on a special vacancy or recall election ballot. Now, I know we're not talking about those items. However, I wanted to make sure that you had that information because, believe me, those types of things do show up. Okay, so the nomination petition is created by you, by the municipal clerk, and it contains specific elements that are prescribed in state statute. And I want to let you know that state statute, that a nomination petition is the only type of petition that is required to be created by the municipal clerk. Now, there's a variety of other citizen petitions. There's the initiative petition, referendum petition, recall petition, and generally there's no requirement that those petitions be created by you. And I want to just segue here. because this is pretty important. And quite honest, and I know that there are some municipalities, municipal clerks, that do create these petitions for use by citizens. I never have, and it is my personal recommendation that it not be done. And the reason for that is that if there is a protest on the form of the petition, you basically are having to hear the protest on something that you created. So kind of stay out of it. But again, nomination petition, that is your responsibility. So in a regular municipal election, the petition is available and can be circulated beginning on 91 days before the day of the election, and it must be filed no later than 71 days before the day of the election. And remember, when you're counting days, the election day is day 0, the day before is day 1, and you move backwards till you see 71, make a mark on your calendar that that's the date, and then continue until 91 days before the day of the election. Every day counts, weekends and holidays included. Now, you probably, if you're on the municipal clerk listserv, you noticed that recently there have been some questions asking what the deadline is to prepare the nomination petitions. And if you've read my answer, that's great. And if you haven't, I will give it to you now. There is no deadline that is required in statute for the preparation of the petition and or the petition packet. So your deadline really is how long it's going to take you to put all the materials together so that on the 91st day before the day of the election, somebody walks into your office 1 minute after it opens and you can hand that petition to them. So it's up to you. How long is it going to take you to prepare your packet, to get it printed? How long is it going to take you to get your instructions? How long is it going to take you to find and assemble your Fair Campaign Practice Act documents if you need them? That is totally up to you, and it's going to vary from municipality to municipality and municipal clerk to municipal clerk, depending upon how much time you're spending doing other things. So just keep that in mind. Your deadline really is that 91st day before the day of the election. Now, I bring up the next point just to let you know this. In a special vacancy or recall election, the best practice is to allow a maximum of 20 days to circulate the nomination petitions. And the reason for that is that the nomination petition is the same one you use in your regular election, and the number of signatures required is the same as what you need in your regular election. And we'll talk about those signatures in a moment. So it makes sense to allow the same number of times. Sometimes I get questions from people who are looking to do a special election and they go back to the 91 and 71 days before the day of the election. Those days do not apply in either a vacancy or a recall election. And in fact, I believe now in statute, with a change to statute, the recall statutes now say 20 days in order to circulate the petition. So before I move on, any questions?
I am not seeing specific questions to that.
Do you have any questions at all?
Nope, we just had one on mic and camera access, and I just want to remind everybody that the only person who has power on that right now is Karen. You can add your questions into the chat box or the question box. So, and then a shout out to Erie. We've got 3 people making it social and they're watching together.
Oh, right. And I think there's some Mountain Town folks that are watching together over lunch. I'm not sure, but I think either they did that last time or they're doing it now. So yay to those people as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so here are the contents of your nomination petition. First of all, you need to include the name and the address of the candidate, and we want the residence address and the office being sought. Now, state statute prohibits any person from being a candidate for 2 offices at the same time. So for purposes of circulating nomination petitions, that, in my opinion, means somebody cannot have 1 petition for mayor and one petition for trustee and get signatures on both and then decide which one they want to turn in. That decision really needs to be made by the person prior to picking up the petition. Now, one way you can help them out with that decision is by filling in the name of the position on the petition itself by including the word trustee or mayor. And then that way, when they come in and they ask for a petition, you say, which one? If they don't say which trustee or mayor, and you can give them the correct petition, and then that's the one they have to circulate. So what we want to do is we want to prevent people from, having the decision at the back end. They should have thought about this before they pick up the petition. So the signature lines include the following elements: their signature, their printed name, the street name and number, and what we're looking at here is residence address, not P.O. box. So, and then the city, the name of the city or the town, in your case, it's going to be your town, the county, and the date that they sign. Now that's a lot of information to get, and you're not going to be able to squeeze it all in on one line if you intend to be able to read what they've included. So what I always think is really important on a petition is to allow 2 separate lines for each signature. So maybe the first line is the signature and the printed name and maybe the date of signing, and then the residence address with the town and the county are on the second line. You can do it any way you want, but again, you need to have all of those elements in there. And the reason for the printed name is because you can't always read the signature. And the other thing that I suggest is that if you do use 2 lines, don't make, so you've got 2 lines and then with number 1, and then you have 2 lines for number 2. Don't separate the signature lines by very dark borders. And this is a visual thing, because the way people write, they may write their letters up into the borders and you're not going to be able to read it. So create the petition in a way that is going to be easy for people to fill in, and it's going to be easy for you to check the signatures. And we're going to talk about what you're looking for when you check the signatures a little later on in today's webinar. This signature lines, as many pages as you need, is followed by the affidavit of circulator. And I've given you the citation from which you can take the exact language. Now, the way the statute is written is it's written where it says the affidavit of circulator shall include the following information. That's not exactly how it goes, but you want to write it so that you say I, name of circulator, and then write out what is in there. So that's the language that you want to use, and it's all there for you. Then that is followed by an affidavit of acceptance of nomination, and I've also given you the statute from which you can get that information, and that will include the name of the person as they wanted to appear on the ballot. They can use whatever name they want, their first name, middle name, last name, their first name, last name, a nickname, whatever. The one thing they cannot use are any indications of degree or profession. So they can't use doctor, they can't use PhD, they can't use CMC, those kinds of things. And then I want to note the following. The nomination petitions do not contain any warnings to signers of the petitions, nor the names of persons comprising a vacancy committee. For the latter, we did away with that statutorily many, many years ago. So hopefully all of your nomination petitions, which you've used since then, no longer contain that. And the reason there is no warning, if you look at what the warning says, it says, do not sign until you've read or have read to you the entire petition. Well, on a petition where you have to read it, like a recall petition or an initiative or a referendum, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to read in order to decide if you want to sign the petition. But in a nomination petition, anything you need to read is at the top. I, so-and-so, am interested in running for the office of such and such. That's it. So there is no warning. There's no warning required. Okay, questions at this point?
Yeah, we have one question. I think you might have addressed it there, but just for clarity, we have a question on at the bottom. It says warnings are not contained. Does that mean they should not be on the petition, or simply that they are not required?
They should not be on the petition.
Thank you. That's it.
If you look at statute, you will not see any requirement to put a warning on that petition. But I've looked at a lot of petitions, and people do that because they appear on other kinds of petitions, but not on this one.
And then one more has popped up, which says, what about a warning noting someone signing needs to be a registered elector?
We'll talk about that in just a moment. That will go on the instructions, and I do mention instructions further on, and we'll talk about kinds of things you want to put in the instructions, not on the petition. The petition should only contain what is required in state statute. Information about how to sign, when to sign, that kind of thing is great, but not on the petition itself. Okay?
One last one. Can you just help clarify or define vacancy committee a little bit?
Okay. In the old days, if someone circulated and turned in a nomination petition, and then they either withdrew or they died or moved out of town or somehow became ineligible, there was a provision for 3 people to pick someone else to run in their place. And it was an optional inclusion, and if nobody filled in any names, then the first 3 people who signed were eligible to pick somebody else, which is kind of ridiculous when we don't, I mean, if we were running partisan elections and these were, I could see where it would make sense, but it didn't make any sense whatsoever to have 3 random people pick somebody else. If somebody withdraws, resigns, dies, or moves away or whatever, it's as if the petition was never filed. So we did away with the vacancy committee many, many years ago. But in the old days, it was optional, but it was still part of the nomination petition. So that's a bit of history.
Great. One last question, and then we'll keep on moving and questions can keep on coming in. But what about candidate affidavits? Are they required under Title 31?
All right. If you're talking about the candidate affidavit form from FCPA, I'll talk about that later, but the answer is maybe. But the affidavit of circulator and the affidavit of acceptance is your candidate affidavit for purposes of the nomination petition.
Great. I think we've calmed now on the questions, so we can move ahead. Although some of these probably will come back as you approach them in the topic.
No problem. All right. Next slide, then, please. All right. The minimum signature requirements. I've put in everything here, but the one you want to look at is your first bullet. For statutory towns, all that a candidate needs is 10 signatures. So you can see how much better off the candidates are than if they were, you were a statutory city or if you were a home rule municipality. And if I have any statutory city or home rule municipality clerks here, you can pay attention to the rest of this. But here's what's important. If somebody shows up, well, let me do it a little differently. First of all, I would not accept any petition. Well, let me re-up what I was going to re-up. Okay, so the petitions, any petition that's filed with you that contains fewer than the minimum number of signatures is not a valid petition. It's very clear that the clerk shall not accept any petition that does not include the requisite number of signatures, the required number of signatures, which for statutory towns is 10. So if somebody comes in with a petition and says, here's my petition with 5, I'm going to go out and get more, don't accept it. Do not accept any petition that has fewer than the number of minimum signatures, because they'll have to start over. They'll have to start over. So please don't do that. And you know, it's just more work for them, and you're probably going to make them angry. So when we talk about instructions, this is one thing that can go on the instructions. If there are no questions, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens when the signatures come in and they're not all valid, and believe me, not all of them will be valid. Nomination petitions is really the only type of citizen petition that can be cured or fixed or amended or updated. Recall petitions sort of can be cured, but initiative and referendum cannot. So you are going to be encouraging people to turn in more than the number of signatures they need, but not everybody will. If you tell them they need 10 signatures, they're going to stop at 10 signatures. So when you check the signatures, and we'll talk about what you're looking for again later on. I've got all this stuff kind of in order. Let's say they turn in 14 signatures, and you check the signatures, and the number of good ones or valid ones falls below 10, then the petition needs to be fixed so that they can achieve their minimum goal of 10. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to contact the candidate immediately. And then you're going to let them know that they have until, now pay attention to this, prior to 64 days before the election to cure it. In other words, to get enough signatures to bring their total up to 10. Prior to 63 days means what? It means the 64th day. So you're going to, when you call them and tell them they need to fix their petition, you tell them, give them the deadline. You give them the date. So again, election day is day 0. On your calendar, you should have an indication of the deadline for curing the petition. And when these petitions come in, check the signatures ASAP. Don't wait until, even though you only got 10 signatures, do not wait until the last day that they can be turned in to start checking the signatures, because you want to give people enough time to fix the petition if they need to. And by waiting till the very end, you're sort of not giving them as much time as they could have. I mean, if they pick up a petition on the first day and turn it in 4 days later, why are you going to wait another 16 days before you let them know their petition's not valid? So make sure you do it as soon as you can. So when they cure the petition, in other words, when they go to get new signatures, what you're going to do is you're going to give them another blank petition, and then it's going to be circulated. The circulator is going to sign it. There's a new affidavit of, acceptance. So they're going to, as if it were a brand new petition, or they never took one out before. And the reason for giving them a new one if they need new signatures is because the acceptance of nomination is the acceptance of the nomination of the people who signed before they signed their name to the acceptance. So if you get new signatures, you have to have a new acceptance. That's why you give them a new blank petition. Now, if the affidavit circulator or the affidavit wasn't properly filled out, generally they miss a date, or maybe for some reason the notary seal was missing or something like that, then what you do is you would return the original petition for the cure on that particular petition. And then again, remember I said that if somebody turns in a signature, a petition that is less than the number of signatures required, or less than 10, fewer than 10, it's invalid, and you cannot cure an invalid petition. So, but if somebody turns in 10 and it falls down to 8, it's a valid petition turned in because it was 10 signatures. They just have to cure it. So I hope everybody understands the difference and the distinction of what you're doing. So now I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions.
Erin, thanks. We do have one asking, does that mean the petitions of the uncured petition do not count?
Of the uncured petition, you mean if the original, let's say, if the original comes in and they turned in 10 or more signatures, or whatever the minimum is, the 10 or more signatures for statutory towns, and it went down to 8, it means, first of all, because they turned in the minimum number, it's a valid petition, but it needs to be fixed because only 8 signatures are valid. I hope that answers the question. If not, please rephrase.
Yep. We'll see if another follow-up on that one comes up while we wait to see if that was answered or not. Let's see. Just to clarify, this is from another attendee today. The number of unchecked signatures must be over the minimum. If it falls under the minimum after checked, then able to cure.
Correct.
Okay.
So it has to be 10 or more when it's turned in. And then after you check, if it's less than 10, they've got to get it back up to 10.
Okay. And I think that's it for now.
All right. Well, we can always, we can always talk about this later on. So, all right. Next slide then, please, Denise.
Yep. Wait, I'll go to next slide, but we did have that follow-up with for more clarity on the initial question was they're looking to know if the signatures from an uncured petition count with the second new position.
Yes.
Petition, sorry. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The whole idea is that how many ever petitions it takes to get the valid number. So there's 2 parts. They must turn in at least 10 signatures. That doesn't mean that every signature they turn in is a valid one. And we're going to talk about what constitutes a valid signature. If when checking them, there are some that aren't valid, then they can add to what is valid in order to get back up to 10. The only time the entire petition is thrown out initially or not accepted initially is if they turn in one with fewer than 10 signatures. Okay.
Great. And we have had just a couple more roll in. This has started the ball going on a few, so let's take a few more here and then we'll move ahead if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect. So, a question asking, our office staff are all notaries. Can we notarize for the petitioners?
You can. Some municipalities have decided that they don't want to be involved in notarizing nomination petitions, but there is nothing illegal if you decide to do that.
Perfect. Then the next one is, so if the petition is valid, but there are only 8 valid signatures, when they cure, do they collect 10 new signatures or just 2 to make it up to 10?
Well, they collect as many as they need in order to get to 10. And if they only collect 2, and one gets thrown out, then they're, they have to do it again, as long as they meet the deadline. I always suggest that in your instructions, you tell people to get more than they need in order to ensure that 10 valid get counted. Don't give them a number, but do more. So I think it's poor on the part of the candidate to, first of all, only get 10, and then if only 8 are valid, to only get 2 more.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense to me. How hard is it to get 15, initially, just to have a nice buffer?
Yeah. Okay, we're asking for a little more clarity. If you can just kind of revisit and maybe highlight the top points again on the affidavit of nomination and why you need a fresh one when they get a new petition when curing.
Okay. If you look at the language in the acceptance of nomination, it says, I accept the nomination of the people who signed my petition. They sign before, they sign with the date, and then your signature and the date comes after that. So if you go and turn in the original petition and get people to sign after the date of your acceptance, that's not kosher. That doesn't work. Just remember that if they need more signatures, you give them a brand new petition. And then what they'll do is they'll get 8 more signatures, whatever, 6, 4, whatever they need. And then their new acceptance of nomination says, I accept the nomination of the people who signed my petition. That's why you give them a new one.
Thank you. Quick follow-up to that one is when curing a petition, would they need to meet the minimum petition amount? Say it's 10 again, or just combined with the original petition to meet the minimum?
Just combined with the original petition.
Perfect.
But if they want to get 10 more, they can. They can get as many as they want.
Great.
In order to create that good buffer.
Great. And then kind of our last one before we move on is, does the clerk keep the uncured petition while the candidate continues to gather signatures, or send that uncured petition with the candidate?
I would keep it. There's no reason after they've turned it in and you've checked the signatures, they're not going to do anything with the petition because you're going to give them a new one. So just hold on to it. And then when the new one comes in, put them together.
Thanks, Karen. I think we're ready to move ahead if you are.
All right, I am. Good questions. Good questions. Okay, objections to nominations. You don't see this often, however, it's in statute, so I thought I would bring it up. An objection to nomination can be made in writing with the clerk within 3 days after the petition is filed. And once there is an objection to the person's nomination, and we'll talk about what that could be, then what you do is you contact the candidate and say, somebody's filed an objection to your nomination for this reason. And then you get to decide whether you agree that the objection is valid. And the petition and so the objection can be on either the form of the petition or on substance. And if you find it's defective, and we'll talk about what those can be in both cases, then they can go ahead and amend it, and which means they refile it within 30 days after you say, yep, it's there's a problem with this, and not later than the 64th day before the day of the election, which is the same day as the cure date. Now let's talk about this. You don't see it very often, but let's talk about this. So earlier when I was reviewing my slides, I was trying to figure out what could be defective about the form of the petition. And if you followed, so if there is any kind of issue with the form of the petition, that's on you, because you're the one that creates the form of the petition. I'm trying to think, maybe you didn't write the notary portion of the petition correctly, or there was no place for the notary to include the date that he or she signed or something like that. More likely what you're going to get is an objection to the substance, which deals with the candidate, and most likely what you're going to get is somebody who's objecting that the person doesn't really live within your town, and we're going to talk about that later. I put this in here. I wouldn't obsess about this too much, but I wanted to let you know that there is a procedure in statute that allows for a citizen to object to a nomination. And I also want to just let you know that if you make a decision on the form, if you say there's nothing wrong with the form, that's it. But if the issue at hand is one of substance, like they really, you think the guy does live in the town and they still don't, they can take your decision to district court. So Don't lose any sleep over this, but I did want to let you know about it. But are there any questions about this?
Just a couple, and I think the first one is just a clarification that does this mean an accepted nomination on the objection to nominations?
Well, yeah, it's actually I mean, it's basically after remember it says the objection is made after 3 days after the petition is filed. So there has to be a petition in your hands in order for somebody to object to it. They're objecting to the nomination of the person who filed the petition.
Great.
While it's circulating, there's nothing you can do because you have nothing to rule on as far as, and people can pick up petitions and never turn them back in. There's no requirement that once they get one, they have to turn them in.
Right. And then we've got, as far as objections, if someone comes in and asks for a petition and they state they are not full-time citizens, can they receive a petition?
No. Well, yes. And let's hold off on that till I get to the issue of residency at the very end of this. Okay?
Okay. We'll put a pause on that one and come back to it.
Okay. Anything else at this point?
Let's see. We've got, because of the objection, how do we let residents know that a petition has been filed?
How do you let residents know?
Yeah, and I invite this individual to ask more clarity if we need more clarity on that question.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I wouldn't let anybody know that a petition has been filed until you've certified it as valid. So if a nomination petition has come in and there's an objection, until you make a decision as to whether the objection is sustainable and it's not a valid petition, I wouldn't say anything.
Okay. And I think our other question refers to that citizenship again. So, and you said you're going to get to that later on the residency.
That is one of the main questions that I see, this whole thing of residency. Yeah, okay.
No spoiler alerts, we'll get to that.
We'll deal with it. All right, so let's move on. Again, don't obsess too much. All right, so now let's look at what I call nomination petition packets. In addition to your petition, some clerks like to put together additional information to give to people when they come in. And here are the kinds of things that can be included. First of all, instructions to the petition circulators. That, to me, is so critical. And I think it's important and really should be part of when you hand out a petition, you hand out this information so that everybody knows exactly what they need to do. You give them the number of minimum signatures that they need to turn in with a suggestion that they get more. You don't know how many more, but just more additional signatures in the event that some signatures could be disqualified. You give them the date by which they have to turn petitions in. And if for some reason this is a day of the week where you are closed, you got to be, your town is closed to the public, you still have to be there and available to give people the opportunity to take the full time period to circulate their petition. I would include instructions to, ensure that, when the people sign, make sure that all the portions of the signature lines be completed. I would even suggest that you tell them to use blue or black ink. Those kinds of things are really important to know. Another thing that I think is important is a candidate calendar. Now, last month, we talked about creating your, what I call your office calendar, the calendar for you with all your deadlines and all the information you need for the election that you are running. The candidate calendar would be information that the candidates need to know. They don't need to know all the stuff that you're going to do. They do know when they need to turn the petition in, the deadline for curing the petition, the deadline for withdrawing from nomination. They need to know if they're going to accept money or spend money, they're going to need to know the FCPA filing report dates, deadlines, and remember, they have been changed. For statutory towns, the dates have changed. If you're a municipality with a population of, I think it's fewer than 1,000 people, the dates haven't changed. But if you're more than 1,000, your dates have changed. And I think I put out an email, and I can do it again, of the bill number. It's House Bill 23-1245 that changed those deadlines. It also limited the amount of money that an individual can contribute. Now, I know in statutory towns, these are not big money races. They're not a lot of money races, but I just wanted to make sure that you know about it. Another thing you can include is any information regarding service on your board. When your meetings are held, are there other committee meetings? Other things they might need to know. In other words, just information about what to expect if they get elected to office. And then finally, the FCPA forms and instructions. Now, somebody earlier mentioned the affidavit of candidate. And what I want to make very clear is that the affidavit of candidate is a form that is related not to the nomination process, but is related to the Fair Campaign Practices Act. If a candidate does not intend to receive any money, does not intend to spend any money, including his own money, then there's no reason to file a candidate affidavit, because the FCPA, Fair Campaign Practices Act provisions are not relevant. However, if you are aware that generally in these elections, candidates do spend money or do collect money, then it's important to include the candidate affidavit, the committee registration form, and the forms they fill out if they do spend money or collect money. So the way it works is no money, period. Nothing needs to be filled out. If you're going to spend only your own money, you fill out they fill out the candidate affidavit, and there is a form that in the FCPA, there is a form that you fill out when you're only spending your own money, when a candidate's only spending his own money. But if somebody is going to collect money and then spend the money that is collected, there's the candidate form, affidavit of candidate, the committee registration form, and then all of the reports that need to be filed on a regular basis. So you will know how it works. And the reason clerks include the FCPA forms in with their packet is because it's easier to provide those forms before any activity takes place than it is to kind of hunt down the candidate when you know they've spent money or received money and they haven't filled out the forms in accordance with state law, and then you never hear from them. So it's a lot easier to be, I hate the word proactive, but that's what you're going to be. Better to be proactive than to be reactive. And any information you include in the packet should not be stapled to the petition. You can put it in there, you can paperclip them all together, but do not staple them to the petition itself. That needs to stand by itself. And you can decide. I think it's important to have at least the first two items that I've listed here. That will help you, that will help them. That way you don't have to answer a bazillion questions that are all the same. So, any questions about the packets?
Yes, we have a couple come in. First one is kind of a little rollover from the last slide, but I think it ties a bit to what you're talking here, is if a core request is submitted requesting who has filed petitions, even if they're not certified, do clerks disclose that?
Okay, all right. This goes back to the discussion that's been around the listserv recently regarding the list of people who've picked up petitions. First of all, the list is not a requirement. Number one, it's not a requirement. It's more for information only. Clerks generally like to know who has picked up a petition, and the media likes to know that, and the citizens like to know that. So you create this list, and remember, the petition doesn't have to be turned in once it's picked up. Somebody can pick up a petition on behalf of someone else. Someone can pick up a petition with the intent of running and then deciding not to and give that petition to someone else. So the list is only as good as the information provided. When I used to keep a list, and I did in both Lakewood and Aurora, the information that I asked people to fill in, and if they didn't want to fill it in, it was that was their choice, the date, their name, who they're picking up the petition for, which could be either somebody else or self. And then I have a blank column for date returned. And then if anybody comes in and says who picked up a petition, I can show them the form. So the answer is yes. You don't need a core request necessarily for that. Somebody can call you and do that because the document is there. And if they're running for office, it's pretty public anyway. So there's absolutely no reason for you to withhold that information. What I always like to say when I give them a list is that these are the people who indicated their intent to run for office. Until I get a valid petition, they are not officially a candidate. So that's what I would suggest.
Great. Thank you. And then one of our participants, J. Rob, has shared with us a link to HB 23-1245. So I will put that in the chat if anybody's needing to find that and bookmark that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Great. Yep. And that's the FCPA deadlines. That's so they know. Okay. All right. And, anything else?
Yep. We had another question on the filing deadline regulations for the FCPA again. I just pasted that PDF into the chat, so I'm guessing they're there, but if you want to highlight a few.
Let's see if I can, I'll try to remember this. Okay, so currently in statute, the deadlines for filing fair campaign practices reports are 21 days before the day of the election, the Friday before the day of the election, and 35 days after the election. And then if there's still money left in the account annually, on the first of the month in which the election occurred, or for statutory towns, April. So that would be April 2025. For municipalities that are larger, and this is kind of, they thought they were doing us a favor, but no, don't ask. Anyway, so for municipalities, I think it's above 1,000. It's either 1,000 or 2,000 population. The deadlines are now 60 days before the day of the election, 30 days before the day of the election, I think it's 15 days before the day of the election, 30 days after the day of the election, and again, annually on that April, the first of the month. So I believe, and I'm doing that off the top of my head. So check the statute, and thank you, Jay, for posting that.
Yep. Just another quick question kind of around that FCPA affidavit. Do they need to, don't they need to sign the initial FCPA affidavit, the one that basically states they understand and will comply with all requirements?
Not if they're not going to spend money or collect money, there's no reason to sign that. That's the candidate affidavit form.
Great. And then another one here, just asking if you can list the forms again, that if they are spending other than money besides their own, what they need to fill out.
Candidate affidavit, committee registration form, and then there are a series of forms that are specifically for itemizing the expenditures and the contributions.
Great. And I think that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and those forms, they're hard to find on the Secretary of State website, but they're there. They're there. We'll try to figure out, I always have trouble finding them, but they are there, so.
Great, and I think you just responded to that, but I'll have our last question person let me know if they needed more clarity. Just asking, thought there was also an FCPA form indicating non-contributions or expenditures. I think you just addressed that when you talked about the different forms.
Yeah, there is one of those. I think where that would be really important too is that if in one reporting period you spent money or collected money and maybe in the second one you didn't. But you know, a lot of these forms I think sometimes got created for our elections, because I guarantee you're not going to find a state race where there's not money collected or spent. So, but that form does exist.
Great. And then finally, a follow-up question on the CORA, looking if it's not a list of those who picked up the petition, but names of those who have actually filed but are not certified yet.
I would wait until they're certified to get that information out.
Great.
And then it's obviously public information. I mean, again, if you've got a list and you've got a date returned and somebody comes in or asks for it, you can show that. But you could also explain to them that until I have a certified petition, they are not an actual candidate.
Great. Thanks, Karen. I think we're ready to move on if you are as well.
And let me just say, we might go a little past 1 o'clock. I hope that's okay, because these are great questions and I want to make sure I get through all the slides.
Yep, we will stay online. As I said, if people have to leave because of other obligations, they can leave, but we will have the full recording available later as well.
Correct. Okay. Next, please. All right. Now, let's talk about checking your signatures. And these are things you need to do. First of all, it is highly recommended that each signature be individually reviewed and checked. The statute is fairly clear that you can do this or you could do it some other way. You know, at the state level, they do a random sampling and they do X number of signatures, and then they extrapolate whether, based upon the results they get with this group, whether they have enough signatures, because believe me, there is no way to check tens of thousands of signatures in the time period in which they have to do it. But with 10 or 15, no problem. Check every signature. Here's what you need to be looking for. First of all, and I don't have it listed here, but first of all, I'll wait till the next one, which is, these are things to do, then there'll be things not to do. But anyway, here's what you look for. This is really important, that the name and the address on the petition match the name and address on the voter registration list that you are using to check the signatures. And the more of the name and the address, the more important is that the addresses match, because statute is very clear that in order for a signature to be considered valid, when a valid signature is required, the address must match. If it doesn't match, generally it means somebody moved and forgot to change their voter registration address. So the name and the address must match, and we're going to get to the name part on the next slide. The person was registered to vote prior to signing the petition. Now, here's what's going to happen. Here's what could happen, not what's going to happen, but here's what could happen. When a person registers to vote, depending upon when they register to vote and the number of people who are also registering to vote, and by that I mean the closer you get to an election, the more registrations are likely to come in. So what happens is the county clerk will batch all of the registrations and then do the data entry of these signatures as a group. And that might happen 1 or 2 days after they sign the petition. And where you see that mostly show up and is the subject of a protest has to do with initiative and referendum petitions. But that's generally what happens. Some county clerks, where there's not a huge population in their county, they can get to it right away. But the closer they get to election day, they're doing a whole lot of other things. So, but what you want to do is, but if a person signs a petition and it's very clear that they registered to vote like 7 days after they signed it, to me, it's not a valid signature. The other thing you want to make sure is that all portions of the signature line or lines were completed. Signature, printed name, street address, town, county, date of signing, all of that has to be completed. That the person didn't sign more petitions than he or she was able to sign. And let me explain how this works. In town elections, the candidates generally run at large, which means that citizens, if you've got 3 positions that are up, voters can vote on 3 candidates. If there are 5 candidates, they got to pick 3. 1 mayor, and let's say in a normal, I'm going to say normal election, half your board runs at a time, so it would be 3. Or if you've got 4, it would be 2. So the number of positions you are eligible to vote on is the number of petitions you can sign. So citizens can sign 1 petition for mayor, and they can sign 3 petitions for board, or 2 petitions if you only have 4. And if somebody signs more than that, then the one that's counted is the one where the signature was affixed or signed earlier. Not when the petition was turned in, but when the signature was put on the petition. Because sometimes the person, one guy or one gal is faster than the other, but the dates for signing were actually later. So if for some reason you had, let's say you have let's look at mayor, because that's easier. So you've got 3 candidates for mayor. Person can only vote, only sign 1. Let's say he signs 2 and they're the same date. Well, since you can't figure it out, that signature on both petitions is declared to be invalid. And I know I'm going to get questions about this, but that's fine. And then the other thing is you want to make sure that somebody is not signing for him or herself and somebody else. And you'll see that. You'll see that with spouses a lot. They'll be together, and the woman will fill in hers, and then she fills it in the same for her husband, and you can pretty much tell that the signatures are the same. And since you don't really know who signed which, both of them have to be invalidated. Questions?
Yes, we've got a couple starters and we'll see it rolls in again. But just a quick one, as we're looking at, as you said, the voter registration list, there's a question on how to get the current list of all the registered voters for a town or a city.
Well, you can have two possibilities. You can use your DEO access. And there is, when you look up a name, there is a section, I think, for registration date. Or a lot of clerks do is they obtain a list of registered all, if you're doing a polling place election, from your county clerk and recorder, or if you are doing a mail ballot election, you already will have one from your county clerk no later than 30 days before the election, and there's a requirement that they give you one 20 days before the day of the election. So you're using the information that is in the voter registration list maintained by your clerk, your county clerk and recorder.
Great. And then this is a question that's been asked maybe a couple times, maybe on the listserv or whatnot, but if a clerk's property is split in half between county and town lines, the mailbox along with a few of their structures are in the town, but their house is in the county, are they considered town residents or county? And I don't know which specific city or what they're talking about here. If they're willing to share, I'm happy to share that.
They have to be a resident of the town in which they wish to run. And they have to be, if they're signing a petition, they have to be a resident of the town for whose petition they are signing.
Okay. And thank you, Nicole from Boone. She's the one asking that, and she said we could share that. So.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Nicole.
Yeah. Thanks, Sal. So, and then we have a question here on let's see, sorry, one just bumped up there. So let's see, if we have 4 trustee positions, can they sign 4 times? And I'm guessing that means for each different position.
Yes, if you have, if you're going to vote on 4, you can sign 4 petitions.
Okay.
If you're going to vote on all 6, God forbid, you can sign 6.
Okay. Going back to our residents of the town question, is there a way to confirm? Because it seems like an individual may not know if they're a resident or not.
That's coming up. Hold on.
Okay. Hold on to that one, Nicole. We'll see if we'll get to that one.
I know I think I've got 2 more slides, and I know we're already past 1
Yep.
o'clock. Shouldn't be much longer. Okay.
Okay. And Nicole, we can take you offline if we need to, if it's specific that we got to follow up, but others may be curious, so we'll try to get to that. And then also, if someone signs a petition on, say, like the 18th, but isn't a registered voter and then registers on the 20th, is it invalid? So if they sign the petition before they're a registered voter?
If they truly did not register until after they signed the petition, then the answer is it's not a valid signature. And I just think because you're not really going to know, and you're not going to want to call them to find out exactly, and the only record you're going to have is what the county clerk shows. I would, and hopefully they have enough signatures that if you invalidate that one as not being registered before they sign, there's still enough to make it a valid petition. So I would disqualify it.
Thank you. That's it if we're ready for next slide.
Yeah, okay. And so now these are things to don't when you're checking signatures. You're not going to disqualify a signature because a nickname or a shortened name was used. Remember I said the name and the address have to match. The important thing is the address. But, there are people who use their middle name all the time instead of their first name. And that's how everybody knows them, and that's how they sign everything. So just because it's not their first name, it could be, their nickname, Ed, Ted, Margie, Peggy. I'm trying to think. There's, Alex, could be Alexander or Alexandra, but if the name and the address, and you're pretty sure that's who it is, do not disqualify it just because a nickname or a short name was used. And don't disqualify it if a middle name was omitted. I mean, the only time I ever use my middle name on anything is when I sign the back of my mail ballot. Because that's how I'm registered. But otherwise, very few people actually know what my middle name is. Not that I'm ashamed of it, I just don't use it. Don't also disqualify a signature because someone filled in a portion of the signature line. Now this is kind of, so the petition, you tell the person, fill it all out. They fill it, they give it back to the circulator. Circulator doesn't look at the signature, which they should right away, and later discovers that the name of the county was left out. Or there was like a ditto in the county. It's still okay if their address, when you figure, shows up in the county. Most municipalities are not in more than one county, but there are some that are, and that's why the county is in there. And also, I firmly believe, although I have no way of knowing this for sure, that these petitions were kind of based upon the ones that are done at the state level. And then we have 64 counties, so people have to include their county because the same address might be in 2 different counties. So you need to identify which county it is. The only thing people can't fill out for the person signing is the date. And then the other thing, the other thing is, don't disqualify a signature because of something you know or think you know. I say this all the time: verify, verify, verify. And one thing that is not on here that I want to make it very clear is that when you are checking signatures on a nomination petition, what you are checking is whether the name and the address match. You are not checking the way a person signs their name against the information in the Secretary of State database. You cannot do that in on a nomination petition. That is only to be used for the purposes of verifying a ballot in a mail ballot election. Questions?
Just a couple. So as you talked about the nickname or shortened name, there's a question on, so we shouldn't specifically ask for them to sign with a legal name in the instructions.
You can, it's not, but if they don't, you don't disqualify it.
Great. And then would you disqualify a signature if someone signed with just one last name but are registered with a hyphened last name? For example, if it's like Moreno, but they're registered as Moreno Valenzuela.
If there's only, if you can identify them based on the combination of the name and the address, I wouldn't disqualify them.
Great. Let's see. And this one is, so kind of a hypothetical, looking for kind of a thing here is like, if candidate number 1 turned in their petition and becomes a valid candidate, then candidate number 2 turns in a petition days, weeks after candidate number 1 with the same signature at an earlier date or same date, now taking the signature away from candidate 1, and he now has less than enough signatures, how can you take away the candidate status?
Well, first of all, that would only happen in the case of the mayor, because in when you so in the case of the mayor, when you're voting, when you are allowed to vote on 3 people or 2 people or 4 people or whatever, you can sign that number of petitions. It would only matter if the signature was if the signature was on a petition above the number you were eligible to sign. So just because the fact that somebody turns in a petition with a signature and then turns in another petition with the same signature but an earlier date, if that's still within the range of the number of petitions you can sign, it's not going to be a problem. And I'll tell you what, if in your situation it is a problem, a real-time problem, call me when that happens, and then we can deal with it.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, so they'll call you. Is there a statute they can find some information on that in as well?
Yeah, there is. I don't have it right in front of me, but there is a requirement that does say that you can only sign the number of petitions petitions that you can vote on. Yes.
Right. And then just a quick, I'm not sure what the question is, but can you go back to when someone fills out someone else's line? I think I heard you say that invalidates both, right? But
right.
Maybe clarity on that.
You don't know which of the 2 people did that. So you have to invalidate both of them.
And Elizabeth, you can let us know if we didn't answer your question correctly. I tried to interpret it. So.
All right. Okay.
Let's see, wait, what if someone signs, prints, and dates, but doesn't fill out their address, and then the petitioner fills out the address before turning it in?
Well, I think that would be okay as long as the name and the address match what's in the voter records.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Next slide, yep.
All right. Okay, residency. This is a big, this makes people crazy. Okay. Now, first of all, statute really does not address part-time residency. And we know there are people who have, like, you know, a urban residence, and then they have a mountain residence, or they live in Colorado and then they go to Arizona for the winter or whatever. So what here is, so statute does provide some guidance into whether you determine if somebody is eligible to both run, sign a petition, and vote. So here it is. When a citizen has both a primary and a secondary residence, this is what you consider in order to determine if they're eligible to run for office. The first thing is, where are they registered to vote? If they, you know, if they want to run in your community, but when you look them up, they're actually registered somewhere else, I would say they're not eligible. But if they are registered to vote, even if they're not in their dwelling every single day of the year, I believe they are eligible to run for office. Then what is their primary residence? And there are a whole bunch of factors in statute, and I've been giving you the statute that determine residency. It's not only, you know, if they're somewhere else, do they expect to return there? Where do they register their automobile? There's all kinds of things that you can use. And then let's look at the last one. In order to run for office, it's very clear, has a person resided in the primary residence for 12 consecutive months immediately preceding the date of the election? Let's really look at that. And here's how I interpret it. And I'm not an attorney, which is why I give you the next consideration to talk to your municipal attorney. The whole idea here is that somebody doesn't move into town 3 months before the day of the election, never having lived there before, and decides to run for office because they haven't resided for 12 consecutive months. They've only been in your community for 3 months before the day of the election. But if somebody is a long-term resident and they've been registered to vote in your community for many years, even if they are absent for part of that immediate 12 months, to me, that does not disqualify them because they've been there for a long time and they've only recently decided that they're going to be a snowbird and spend the, you know, winters in Arizona, New Mexico, California, that kind of thing. But if you have a question, consult with your municipal attorney. It's going to come up, I know. It has in every election since I've been around. I believe that's it. So any further questions?
No, I don't think so. So looking at it, hopefully that answered that. And oh wait, we do have one come in. So if a person is registered to vote in your county, but their primary address is on the registration, is listed in another city.
No, they have to be a resident of the community in which they want to run for office. County doesn't matter. Municipal boundaries do.
Great, thank you. And again, as you highlighted, questions, ask your city attorney on that one, right?
And again, you know, and I'll just say that anything that comes up afterwards, I think you know how to find me, and I'm more than happy to answer the questions.
Yeah, and we'll send out a follow-up email. You can also pass questions through me if you forgot how to get a hold of Karen. We've got our clerks listserv as well, and a lot of support there. So, but I think that is it. And so on that note, just want to again thank everyone who stuck around, and a majority of our attendees did today. Some had to leave for some other opportunities, but reminder, we have the third in the series coming up in January. We are looking at potentially rescheduling that one, so stay tuned. We'll let you know if we move the date on that one. And then again, you can get a half credit with the CMCA. I think I got that right this time. For each webinar, we will have a form on cml.org, and I'll send a link out to that too. We may be making a few tweaks to the form, but we will have that available for you to get credit.
Kathy Novak has requested that instead of filling it out and then sending it to her, that it be done online. So we just have to figure out the logistics of how to make that happen.
Yeah. But we'll get that to you so we can make that happen. Again, Karen, thank you. Always a wealth of knowledge. I love how you have an answer for every question. Your experience in this area really shows through, and thank you for sharing that with our members today.
My pleasure. Always happy to help.